Welcome back to another video from the Decision Desk HQ YouTube channel. My name is Ryan Gest, Elections Data Fellow here at DDHQ, and continuing in our analysis of the 2024 general election, we are taking a look at each party's best path to taking, or for Democrats, maintaining control of the United States Senate. If you have not already seen our video covering the Democratic Party's path, go ahead and check that out by clicking the link in the upper right-hand corner. In today's video, we will be discussing the Republican Party's easiest path to controlling a minimum of 50 seats following next year's Senate elections. On your screen right now is a blank 2024 Senate map. 33 of the 100 seats in the United States Senate will be contested in regular elections, the winners of which will serve 6-year terms in the U.S. Congress from January 3, 2025 to January 3, 2031. And one special election will be held to complete an unexpired term ending January 3, 2027. Now, generally, senators are divided into 3 separate classes, whose terms are staggered so that a different class is elected every 2 years. Class 1 senators, who were last elected in 2018, will be up for election again here in 2024. So as of June 2023, 1 Republican Senator, Mike Braun of Indiana, and 4 Democratic Senators, Ben Cardin of Maryland, Tom Carper of Delaware, Dianne Feinstein of California, and Debbie Stabenow of Michigan, have all announced their intention to retire and not run for re-election in 2024. Another Republican, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, resigned early to accept a position as president of the University of Florida. Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen appointed Pete Ricketts as the state's interim senator, and a special election will take place concurrently with the 2024 regular Senate elections to fill that seat for the remainder of its term. Now, the map for these elections, like in the previous Class 1 Senate election back in 2018, is universally considered by election analysts to be extremely favorable for the Republican Party, who will only be defending 10 of the 33 seats up for election. 3 Democrats in this class represent states won by former President Donald Trump in both 2016 and 2020: Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia, while no Republican represents a state won by Democratic President Joe Biden in 2020. To put that into perspective, in the 2 previous Senate election cycles that coincided with presidential elections, that being 2016 and 2020, only 1 senator, Republican Susan Collins of Maine in 2020, was elected in a state that was won by the presidential nominee of the opposite party. Further, Democrats are defending seats in 6 states that Biden won by a single-digit margin: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, Minnesota, and Maine, while Republicans are defending only 2 seats in states that Trump won by a single-digit margin: Florida and Texas. So, to begin, we can go ahead and label all of the states and races that have a high degree of partisan lean in either direction, and where we have no special circumstances as of right now that might make these races uniquely competitive in this cycle. Keep in mind that these Senate elections will be held at the same time as the presidential election, and split-ticket voting, where voters vote for candidates of different parties for different offices, has become more and more rare over the last decade. So how states lean at the presidential level will mostly mirror races at the Senate level as well. I did go through all of the safe Democratic states that you see colored in here in detail in our video covering the Dems' best chance at maintaining their majority. So if you're interested in a little bit more information about these races and haven't already checked that out, feel free to do so right now. Now, as for the safe Republican states, starting in Utah, 1-term Senator Mitt Romney is running for re-election, but is likely to face a serious Republican primary competition after he voted to impeach former President Donald Trump twice. Romney has been endorsed by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, but whichever candidate emerges as the senator's chief competition in this primary will likely receive considerable backing from Trump himself. Whether it is Romney or somebody else, though, Utah is a safe Republican state come November of 2024. As for the states of Wyoming and Nebraska, two-term Republicans John Barrasso and Deb Fischer, respectively, were re-elected in 2018 by significant margins, and are both running for a third term. As previously mentioned, Pete Ricketts will be running as an unelected incumbent in Nebraska's special election after being appointed to replace Ben Sasse, and he is unlikely to face real competition in the primary or the general election, as Nebraska voted for Trump by 19 points in 2020 and has not elected a Democratic senator since 2006. North Dakota and Missouri both feature one-term incumbents, Kevin Cramer and Josh Hawley, who unseated Democratic senators back in 2018. Cramer defeated Heidi Heitkamp by an 11-point margin, and Hawley defeated Claire McCaskill by 6 points. Both will likely, of course, win by wider margins running as incumbents this time around, and in a presidential year, as North Dakota and Missouri are assuredly Republican states. In Mississippi and Tennessee, two-term senators Roger Wicker and one-term senator Marsha Blackburn are running for re-election. Neither state has elected a Democrat to the Senate since the 80s. Finally, in the state of Indiana, one-term Republican Senator Mike Braun is running for governor, and Congressman Jim Banks has already received the endorsement of former President Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He has no notable competition in the primary right now, but even if he did, those endorsements mean that he is very likely to proceed to the general election, where he will be heavily favored over his Democratic opponent. Trump won Indiana by 16 points in 2020, and Braun flipped this seat from blue to red by 6 points in 2018, which was a Democratic wave year. That leaves these 14 states as 2024's battlegrounds, though many of them will likely be much less competitive than others. With all of these states being counted, Republicans have a 47 to 39 seat advantage. And for the purposes of this video specifically, where we're trying to determine Republicans' most doable path at flipping control of the Senate, the presidential election is not necessarily a must-win for the GOP like it probably will be for the Democratic Party. Currently, Republicans only need to win 4 out of these 14 states remaining to reach 51 seats. And as you'll see coming up, Republicans probably do have a better chance right now at flipping at least 4 of those seats than they do at winning the presidential contest. That said, if they do indeed take back the White House, that number would drop to 3, as the Republican vice president would break any ties like Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris does right now. So, to narrow down the path to 51, we can start by coloring in all of the likely blue races that Democrats will be favored to win again in 2024. Now, I did go through all of these races in detail in the Democratic Path video, so if you're interested, go ahead and check that out. Those 4 likely Democratic races, though, raise their total to 43 seats, to Republicans' 47. And this is where the path starts getting much more difficult for Democrats, and you can see just how much this map favors Republicans. Joe Biden either lost each of the 10 states remaining, or won by less than 3 points, and Democrats have incumbents running in just half of them. Even if we do give Democrats all of the races that Biden won in 2020, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that still only gets them to 48. And that's not even close to guaranteed. Republicans will still be shoveling plenty of resources into these states, as Biden carried each of them by very narrow margins. Moving on, out of the 5 states that remain, we can comfortably label Texas and Florida as likely Republican. Former governor and incumbent one-term Republican Senator Rick Scott was narrowly elected in Florida in 2018 with 50.06% of the vote. He is running for re-election to a second term, 2 years after the Florida GOP saw landslide victories in the 2022 gubernatorial and U.S. Senate elections. Incumbents Governor Ron DeSantis and Senator Marco Rubio won by 19 and 16 points, respectively, after Trump carried the state by 3.4 points in 2020, and Florida voted 7.8 points to the right of the nation as a whole, the furthest it had voted from the nation since 1988. That being said, as chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, Scott took much of the blame for a worse than expected midterm for Republicans nationwide, and could be vulnerable to a primary challenge as a consequence. Nevertheless, Florida is a decidedly Republican-leaning state right now. In Texas, two-term Republican incumbent Ted Cruz is running for a third term and is unlikely to face as strong opposition as he did in 2018 when he defeated Beto O'Rourke by just 2.5 points. Congressman Colin Allred is the favorite to win the Democratic nomination this time around, but despite the Democratic Party's ramped-up efforts to turn Texas blue, Trump won the state in 2020 by 5.5 points, and no Democrat has won a general election for statewide office in Texas since Bob Bullock was reelected as lieutenant governor in 1994. Finally, in the state of West Virginia, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin has yet to decide whether he will run for a third term, but Republicans' best news of the cycle thus far came when Governor Jim Justice entered the race. A former Democrat himself, Justice has the endorsement of Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham. However, Republican Congressman Alex Mooney is also in the race, and has received the backing of Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Jim Jordan. Justice does have a significant lead in early Republican primary polling, though, and should he win the nomination, will have a very good chance in the general election, given that West Virginia voted for Trump by 40 points in 2020 and is consistently one of the most Republican-leaning states in the country. That leaves Montana and Ohio as Republicans' most likely pickups to reach 51 seats. Montana is a strongly red state at the federal level, voting for Republican presidential candidates since 1996, including 3 straight double-digit victories, most recently a 15-point Trump win in 2020. That said, 3-term Democrat John Tester was narrowly reelected in Montana in 2018 with 50.3% of the vote, and is one of the few remaining senators nationwide to represent states that voted for the opposing party in the last presidential election. A political anomaly in that regard, the broadly popular Tester is running for re-election in Democrats' best news of the cycle thus far. Still, with split-ticket voting on the decline across the country, and Tester never having won an election by more than 5 points, this is a prime pickup opportunity for the GOP. Retired Navy SEAL turned aerial firefighter Tim Sheehy launched his campaign for the Republican nomination in late June and has already received the endorsements of 3 of Montana's most prominent Republican politicians: Governor Greg Gianforte, Senator Steve Daines, and Congressman Ryan Zinke, along with 7 other Republican senators. This can most likely be interpreted as an eagerness among top Republican officials to keep the other Montana Congressman, Matt Rosendale, from entering the race and engaging in a primary fight with Sheehy. All of that being said, even if Republicans do fall short once again in Montana, they have another prime pickup opportunity in Ohio, which has trended towards Republicans in recent years and is now seen as a decidedly red-leaning state at the federal level, after voting for Trump by 8-point margins both in 2016 and 2020. Republicans also currently control the other U.S. Senate seat, all statewide offices, and a majority in its U.S. representative congressional delegation. Additionally, Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan, viewed by many as the party's ideal candidate for the 2022 Senate election in Ohio, especially after incumbent Republican Rob Portman's retirement, still lost by 6 points to the Trump-endorsed writer and venture capitalist J.D. Vance. Now, 3-term Democrat Sherrod Brown is running for a 4th term, after he was reelected in 2018 with 53.4% of the vote. Brown, like Tester, is generally popular within the electorate of his state, but faces the challenge of navigating a less than favorable environment, especially given that it is a presidential election year in which his Republican opponent will likely benefit even more from the state's partisan leanings. Right now, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose is the current favorite for the GOP nod. Keep in mind that Republicans only need to win one of Montana or Ohio to reach 51 seats. And that is, of course, if they don't take back the White House, in which case they could lose both and still control the Senate. That is all for this Decision Desk HQ video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click that like button down below if you did indeed like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also check out more content from our channel here, and we'll catch you next time.